This episode is brought to you by Indie Film Hustle TV, the world's first streaming service dedicated to filmmakers, screenwriters, and content creators. Learn more at indiefilmhustle.tv. I'd like to welcome back to the show returning champion, John Badham. How you doing, John?
Okay, I could be like Rocky. Turn around.
Exactly.
Okay.
Last time you were on the show, the tribe really loved our interview. We went deep into your history and how you got into the business and down your filmography a bit. So can you, for people who didn't listen to that first one, can you just tell a little bit about yourself? And you've been around the business a few years. So if you could just kind of talk a little bit about what you've done and who you are.
Okay. All right. Well, I came out here in the middle 60s into Los Angeles I was an escapee from the Yale Drama School. And people said, what do you have you directed? And I'd say theater, and they'd say, get out. Nobody liked the idea. Theater, what's that? That's for weirdos. And so my first job was in the mailroom at Universal and delivering mail with my 2 degrees from Yale. There I was. But then everybody else in the mailroom was in the same boat. And the thought of, becoming a director at that point was just kind of ridiculous. It's like you're down at the bottom of the food chain, lower than whale poop, and you're going to be a director. Oh, lots of luck. Mm-hmm. But I spent some time as a casting director at Universal. They eventually trained me for that, and then got involved with some producers who let me start directing. And it's a television at Universal. And then my first movie was with James Earl Jones and Billy D. Williams and Richard Pryor called Bingo Long Traveling All-Stars, which was about a Negro baseball team back in the 1930s when the black people, could not play with white teams and vice versa. But they could if they were barnstorming around the country. So that was kind of the history of that, of those teams where the players were so fabulous. They were much better than the white players, but nobody knew it. Right. That movie actually, in a weird way, got me Saturday Night Fever, which was the next movie that I was able to do, and that tells its own story.
Yeah, we went in deep in how that entire phenomenon happened back in the day.
So I was lucky to get to make a lot of really good movies like War Games and Blue Thunder and Short Circuit. That a lot of people say they grew up with Short Circuit. And how is Number 5? How is Johnny 5?
Oh my God, Short Circuit! Are you kidding me? When I saw I was in fifth. If I remember correctly, that's 85, 86, if I'm not mistaken, around that time period.
That's right. Yeah.
So I was in 5th grade. So I was, I don't know, 10 years old, 10, 11 years old, something like that. And when I saw Short Circuit, my whole world changed. I was just like, I thought it was the coolest movie I ever seen. I was just so enthralled with Johnny 5. It was just so wonderful. And yeah, I mean, I grew up, obviously you've heard this 1,000 times. I grew up on your films. Point of No Return, Drop Zone, Nick of Time, War Games, Saturday Night Fever. I mean, I grew up watching a lot of the films. And it's so funny that your career started in television, then went into features, and then you've kind of gone back to television and kind of been playing in that ballpark for a while.
That's right. And the business has been changing nonstop ever since I started in the mailroom.
It's changed a bit.
It's just so different in so many ways. You take hours to go through all the stuff as we changed from film to digital, and the studio system disappeared, and so many things. Now streaming has become such a big part of our lives, so that the difference between film and television has vanished. I mean, it's not there anymore. And in the middle of this terrible pandemic that we have, the movie business has almost completely vanished, and it shows up now in places we never thought, like our iPhone. we can stream the latest release of something.
It's pretty insane how, production is halted, and we could talk a little bit about like just, I know everyone's talking about trying to get back to work here in Hollywood. And there's TV shows waiting, and there's movies waiting, and everybody's waiting. But at the end of the day, nobody really knows how to really do it. And there's so much like right now, as we're recording this, we're still kind of in that first wave of the virus, and now it's starting to come back. And we're a few days away from July 4th. So now everything's shutting down. Where things were opening up, we're shutting down. So I think Hollywood was like, oh, we're going to open back up. Well, now I don't know, and what's going to happen. And there's just so much uncertainty, and there is no blockbuster season. Like, this is the first summer without blockbusters in the movie theaters since 1975, when they were invented by Mr. Spielberg and Mr. Lucas.
That's right. Since Jaws and Star Wars, yeah, they've gone away. There's going to be a hell of an avalanche of blockbusters when all this is over.
I mean, I don't know. Everyone says it's coming out in the winter. I'm like, but there's only so many slots. There's only so many weekends you can put out, because they've pushed everything from the summer over. The movies that are finished and done are sitting on the shelf, plus whatever was in post that was going to go into to the winter releases. So, I know I've heard a few of them are just holding off till next summer. Not the really big ones, but some other smaller studio fare is waiting till next summer already.
Oh my Lord!
It's that or lose. So it's like, okay, we could keep it and hold on to it on the books for a year, or we can release it and maybe lose our shirts.
Yeah.
So it's a crazy world.
Oh, it's interesting that the Disney movie about trolls.
No, that was Universal. Yeah, it was Universal.
Was Universal?
Yeah, that's
okay. Universal Trolls. Okay, apparently that did fabulously. People were so desperate for something to watch.
But it's interesting. They bought it. Yeah, they paid $20 a pop for it at streaming. But the difference is with Trolls, it was, at the moment it hit, it was a family film. It was, it cost about $90 to $100 million, and it made about $100 million plus whatever they're making now. It's a perfect kind of storm film. But I'd like to see that with a Marvel film. I'd like to see that with the next James Bond. I'd like to see that with, Wonder Woman. These big $200 million plus films. I'm curious to see what it does. I think there is potential for that world. I do think that, look, if Mike Tyson fights back in the day, we're pulling $300-400 million in a night from pay-per-view. Right. There is a potential for that to, for the next big Marvel. Like, imagine Avengers. If Avengers came out right now at $20 a pop, I promise you that movie would probably make $150-200 million this weekend.
Right.
I think it would. But it would be interesting. The whole world is changing so rapidly. Nobody knows what's going on. It's such a unique place in time, specifically for our industry. And you've been in our industry for a few years now, so you've seen things change.
Yeah. Absolutely seen things change. But you got to keep up. I mean, you can't let things get ahead of you, or there's just no way of catching up.
Yeah, and one thing I love about watching your career is that you have kept up. You are working on, as of this year, you've been working on television shows and very, very hip and happening kind of fare out there, and it's amazing to watch how you are continuing. You're an inspiration to all directors out there, that you keep going and you keep making great work. After these years, it's really an inspiration to watch you.
Well, it's fun doing it. That's the good part. If it can be fun doing it, then you're inspired to do more of it. I mean, just working on this show, ABC family show called Siren. Mm-hmm. We're learning so much about how to do underwater photography and transforming normal human beings into mermaids and mermen and having it absolutely believable. It doesn't look like they put on some dumb suit. It's completely believable. And you think, this is a miracle. We couldn't have even thought about doing this like 5 years ago or 10 years ago. and it's so marvelous to see. If we can imagine it, we can do it nowadays, which is quite something.
Would you agree that the you already said it, the line between television and films are starting to blur a bit, but I'm noticing, just from my point of view, that the technology that's happening in television right now is so exciting, specifically like in The Mandalorian with the volume and all the things that they're doing. They're starting to create very high-end looks and budget look, production value at a very low cost. And I think that as this whole industry starts to shift, as we are shifting right now, the $250 million plus film, might become a little bit more extinct because it's just financially, like right now we have no movie theaters. So is there a business model that makes sense for a $250 million plus film without a theatrical release? As we start shifting more towards streaming and moving towards that world, I feel that a lot of filmmaking is they're taking from television now, as opposed to television taking from filmmaking, as far as cost is concerned and quality. Correct?
Yeah. Well, I mean, The Mandalorian is just like another almost quantum leap forward. It was strangely with history going way back to the very beginning of film, where rear projection was the standard of doing things, and then it became outmoded and turned into blue screen, then sodium screen and green screen and all these different screens. But now there we are right back, because they could invent these giant LED screens. So you get what you see is what you get. You have this marvelous stuff, and you probably don't have to move the camera around very much at all, because you just keep moving the background, changing things around.
What I saw from there's a behind the scenes series on Disney Plus explaining the technology is now with the camera talks to the background. So as the camera moves in real space, the perspective changes only in the view of the camera. So you could see, if you're just standing behind watching this whole thing, you just see the focus change, you see the perspective change. So it's like you're on a real location. It's mind-blowing. It really is.
Right. Absolutely. It's a YouTube video, isn't it, that explains all of that.
There's a couple of that, and then there's a series on Disney Plus that explains the entire making of The Mandalorian as well.
Right.
Which is wonderful. So today I wanted to talk about acting and dealing with actors and how you direct actors, because you have obviously such an experience with it. What are the major differences between directing actors and specifically, but in general, directing television, streaming versus feature films?
There's no difference.
Okay. Next question.
There's no difference. There's no difference. You have the same problems in both places. You've got all kinds of stories. Mm-hmm. There's no single kind of story in either field, and actors are coming in and directing actors 101. The first thing that you have to do with them in wherever is to make them feel comfortable and make them feel relaxed. So many of our directors don't know how to do that. They're so focused on the camera angles, the lighting, the shooting, that they don't take the time to get, this delicate, nervous actor who's coming in, bearing his guts in front of everybody, and needing to know that they've got somebody there that's got their back, their front, is there supporting them. You're the coach. And you're there for them. So that's the very first thing that you have to do, and that's going to apply wherever. I teach all of my students that the first thing they do when they get to the set in the morning is they find the actor wherever they are, and talk to them about that day's work. Not something that takes very long at all. It's easy to do, but there's that actor sitting in the makeup chair or something, just fretting and nervous about what today's scene is going to be like, especially the poor day players and the people who are there for just a short while. I mean, they need the most help at all. The guys who are the leads in the show, they're pretty suave and savvy, and they know what's going on, but they still need direction. They still, they still look at you at the end of takes and go, how was it? How was it? And when they look over and they see you just talking to the cameraman or the boom operator or the IT technician, they think, well, he doesn't give a damn about us. And they, they lose confidence and the morale goes down. So this is a huge part of it. It's like chapter 1 in the directing book.
No,
and
so
people say, "Oh yeah, that's easy. That's easy," and then they forget and just don't do it. And just start talking to the cameraman about how about a cool low angle with a 5mm.
right.
So there is no such thing as a 5mm lens. Yeah, but what if there were?
Exactly. Well, then, so what does that first conversation with an actor about his or her character look like? Like, how does that go when you're approaching, not in television, but let's say in a feature film process? You're walking up to the actor for the first time, talking to them about their character. How does that conversation go?
How do you see this guy? What do you think about this character? Tell me about him. Oh, that's interesting. Now, just for a moment, imagine that some god-awful idea is coming out of the actor's mouth. Usually not. They're bright, they're smart, you cast them right. They're not going to come out and tell you crazy things, though Marlon Brando used to do it just to screw with you.
Did you ever get a chance to work with Did you ever get a chance to work with Marlon Brando?
No, but my good friend Richard Donner directed him in the Superman.
Yeah, sure.
And John Frankenheimer got to direct him in the Island of Dr. Moreau. Uh-huh. So I've heard some stories, and he just liked to mess with people just to see if the director knew anything or just to entertain himself. Just get bored sitting around sets, being, one of the greatest actors in the world and being asked to do crap. So he just liked to mess with the directors. But if the actor is coming to you and the idea that they're putting forward is just awful, the way to come back to them is to say, not that's a terrible idea or that's not what we're going to do. It's to say, wow, I never thought of it that way. Tell me more. I want to hear more about this stuff. And that the actor has spent some time thinking about their character and what they have. Let them get a chance to get it out. Let them get it out. If you don't let them get it out of their system, it's going to be in there just causing trouble. And whereas once you share ideas, and this goes down to even discussing how the scene is going to be blocked, and how this moment is going to be. You're always listening. You have to train your listening genes to be paying attention and not to be selling your own ideas as much as giving the actor a chance to kind of catch up with you and see what they've been thinking about. Because, gosh, guess what? They might actually have a good idea. And if they don't have a good idea, if they have a terrible idea, you can usually start to work around it. If you ignore it, it'll just come back and bite you. So, bonding with your actors, making a good relationship with them right off the bat, and so on, because so many actors just don't trust directors at all. Mm-hmm. They've been manhandled and ignored, and directors are afraid of them, hide in Video Village, behind a bunch of displays and have the headphones on, which never come off. And I learned from Sidney Lumet, who says in his book, after every take, I run over to every single actor in the scene, and give them, a little bit of a note or pat on the back, a wink, just something real quickly. He says, we never lose any time. I shoot my movies in 30 days, so it can't take any time to do it. But it definitely, lets the actor know that you're thinking about them, you're watching them, you're encouraging them. It makes a big difference. When I read that, I said, "Oh my God, that's going to take so much time." But what the hell it's Sidney Lumet? I should be listening, right?
Right.
I can try this. This is not Jaime Uncle Schwartz, the crap director. So I started doing. This only takes a few seconds. This is really easy, and the actors really appreciate it. They appreciate it when you listen to them and take advantage of their process, and not be afraid of them.
So let me ask you. So in your career, you have worked with a couple of movie stars over the course of your career. So how do you direct a Johnny Depp or a Wesley Snipes at the height of his career, or these Christopher Walken? Like how do you direct movie stars like that?
Well, you've got to sit and have conversations with them. Sidney Pollack talked to me about how he rehearses with Redford or Streisand or so many of the stars that Pacino, and how does he work with them? And it's to spend. He says, "I'll get Redford up to my place for a weekend, and we'll just sit and hang out and sort of talk about the character and so on. I don't necessarily get them together with the other actors because I like that freshness of them confronting each other. They're trained and so on. They're pretty good at it. But, I get their thoughts. I get us on the same page. I don't want to get to the set and find out that we see the character totally differently. Now, if we're on the same page for that, I'm just trying to help them maximize what they're doing and give them encouragement and give them the room to play. That's really important. We remember that we call actors players, and there's a good reason for that. They need to be in a relaxed, playful state. And Anne Bancroft said to me, what I like coming to the set here is nobody yells at me before I've had a chance to show what I can do.
And do you recommend letting the actor, and this is general, not movie star and all, but do you recommend just letting them go for a take or two and see where they come up with? Because I found personally in my career that when I do that, I find there's magic there, and sometimes they go off the rails, and that's where you pull them back in. But generally speaking, do you recommend letting them go for a bit and then honing them down to where you might want them?
Absolutely. I mean, when I'm staging, I get so much of their input coming back. I may say to somebody, "Okay, well, come in from that door over there and walk over to the desk." But that's all I'm going to tell them. I'm going to let them figure the rest out because so much of it is I'm relying on their instinct as actors, and I have a plan in my back pocket. If everybody came in drunk, hungover, brain dead, I could block that scene, no problem. But I wouldn't get the advantage of their feedback. But so I come in totally prepared and also prepared to totally forget everything I prepared. And being willing to just say, that's okay, a better idea came up. It's all right. But if nobody has an idea, I've thought through it enough so that I'm not blindsided. And the same goes for now once they're performing the scene and they're doing the takes, let them go. Let's see where they're going. Or if you didn't get a chance to do that and they were tied down to a certain way of doing it, you can absolutely freshen the scene up by saying, do it completely the opposite. This is, play this as a comedy instead of a tragedy. Let's shake the scene up here, or do something completely different that you'd like to do. That we can't. I'll say there's no way we can screw this up because we've got some good takes here, and so it's not going to hurt if you can try anything that you like, and sometimes they say, "Oh, great, thank you so much," and it comes out exactly the same. But that's okay. They appreciate.
That's true.
They appreciate it. Oh, was that better? Oh, yeah, right. It was really good.
Oh, so much better. So much
So
better.
much better. Man, I'm glad we did that.
Okay, let's move it on. Let's move on to the next setup.
Move on. Don't publish what we just said here. That we let the secret out of the bag here. Actors are going to be pissed off forever. I knew I couldn't trust that son of a bitch.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you what. When I'm editing, a lot of times I used to have clients behind me, and when I'm editing a movie, and they're like, "Can you move it over for like 5 frames here, or 10 frames there?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I wouldn't do it, and I would play it back again. They're like, "Is that better?" They're like, "Oh yeah, so much better." I'm like, "Yeah, I know." Old editor trick.
Oh, it's great. Great. Absolutely. One of the best tricks ever.
Now, why do directors get tested by their actors? Because a lot of times, depending on where the actor is emotionally, especially if they don't know you and you haven't built that relationship up, they'll test you. Like Mr. Brando, but that's an extreme case. But a lot of times I've found in my career as well that actors will test you to see if you know what you're doing. What's your experience with that, and how do you deal with that?
Well, hopefully you know enough about the script and the scenes that you're doing that you can be conversant with that. What you don't want to happen is having them ask you questions that you don't know the answers to because you haven't prepared and you're faking it all the way through. And they're looking for somebody they can lean on and trust, who's going to give them a little feedback, was that good, and has some sense of taste. So they're constantly watching that. And I'm talking about more experienced actors. The beginning actors tend to be much more malleable because they don't know quite enough and they don't know who to trust. But the experienced ones are going, am I going to pay any attention to this guy? Or am I just I'm just got to hang in there and do it by myself? And that you don't know until you get involved with the actor and just see how they're responding to you and how you can be helpful. Especially in television, you cannot go and tell one of the leading actors about their character. They know about their character better than you'll ever know about their character. What you can tell them is, here's a slightly different way to approach this scene. Let's try to make your objective to sell the other character, to persuade the other character that you want them to do something in particular, as opposed to the way you're doing it now. So you give them different verbs, and active verbs is one of the real good tricks that you have to learn. That an actor will say, "Give me a verb. Give me a better verb." Sell, persuade is not working. How about seduce? Seduce. I can do seduce. Okay, let me have it.
Yeah, so I find that to be an issue with a lot of first-time directors or younger directors or inexperienced directors, where you're right that a lot of times they'll try to, like, either, God forbid, give them a line reading or like try to be on the nose with kind of like try to like micromanage the performance, and that's very difficult for an actor to do. Whereas if you just say, instead of saying, okay, I want you to do this and then I want you to do this with your words and that word, you can't do that with an actor from my point of view. But no. But what you just said is brilliant. Just like, I want you to seduce him, or I want you to seduce her in the way you're talking. And that changes the dynamic of the entire scene for the actor and for the scene in general. Would you agree?
Oh yeah. I mean, what you're trying to avoid is what we call result directing.
Yes.
I want you to be happier here. I want you to be better. I want you to be faster or funnier. All those god awful things. Or how about this one? Okay, let's do this with a lot of energy and give it a lot of heart. The actor thinks, this guy doesn't know what the crap's going on here. He doesn't have a clue. But, you give them a good verb and they're going, great, I can play that. That'll be fun to play. That's another thing that you're looking for, giving them goals that are fun to play, that are interesting that way. But you don't want to be giving them result directions or faster, funnier, those kind of things.
Yeah, Mr.
Can't you cry? Can't you cry in this scene? How about blubbering?
I remember seeing a behind-the-scenes documentary of Star Wars where Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford, they all said there was only two directions that George Lucas gave: faster and more intense. Those are the only two things he said on the set for their performances: faster, more intense.
It happens. And so you realize, okay, I guess we're pretty much in charge of ourselves here.
Exactly. But
and actors like that, actors like Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford, are so good and so experienced that they can internalize those directions and they'll give you something organic. Mm-hmm. They're not just mechanically becoming a robotic of going faster or speaking louder or harder. I'm more intense. How's this? Which is totally unorganic and reads as fake.
Right, and that's where those bad performances come in. Now, how do you give constructive notes on a performance? Which I always find is kind of like a tightrope, because you want to give you don't want to walk up to the actor and go, "That sucked. This is really how you really should go about it." Like, how do you approach that conversation if they're completely off the reservation on where you want them to go?
You know what? Going up to them and trying an idea of where you'd like them to go, selling it as a pitch is always gonna work. And you go up to an actor and you say, it's interesting you were trying to, I felt you were trying to persuade him here, but what would it be like if you were trying to seduce him? What would that be like? So notice, I have not said when you tried that persuading stuff, it sucked. Mm-hmm. What I said was, what would happen if we tried it this way? How would it be if we did, what would happen if you grab hold of her in the middle of the scene and just kiss her? Find a moment that might work. Would that work, you think? And the actor goes, yeah. Let me try it. So we're not necessarily criticizing, because that's not our business. Our business is we're there playing with stuff. We're trying different things, and we're trying not to be judgmental about it, because actors, no matter how tough they may act, they're very sensitive people, and you don't want to be bullshitting them. So you're saying, okay, we're here in the playground, we're playing, let's try it this way. What would happen if? And notice again, I'm not giving orders, I'm asking questions.
That's great advice. That's really, really great advice. Which leads me to my next question. How do you relax a nervous actor? Because a nervous actor is it's like having a skittish cat on set. You need to relax them. How do you relax them?
Boy, that's tough. I think sometimes if you've got a little bit of time, to take a break and say, hey, come on over with me over to craft service. Mm-hmm. You want some coffee, or you feel like some a Coke or something, and go over and just be talking to them about everything but the scene. Talk about, how was your morning? How did you get along? I heard you guys got a new dog. How's that going? Is he house trained yet? Isn't that the bitch when they poop all over your, all your shoes in the dining room you're having dinner? So you talk about everything except the scene. And first of all, it kind of helps them see that you're not freaking out about it. You have a chance. I've taken actors out let's walk around the soundstage here, go outside and, take a breath of fresh air, and let's not talk about the scene. Let's go back in. It takes a bit for them to relax, to get all that stress out, because it's building up like crazy inside of them. And if they're frustrated about what they're doing, I mean, you can always go up to the actor and say, now, what are you playing here? What's your goal here? What do you think is going on here? What do you want out of this scene? That's always something you can go back to at the beginning and say, let's focus again on what the scene's about. That can be very, very helpful, just to remind them of their goals and their objectives, and what the obstacle is. The obstacle is maybe the other character. Dad, can I borrow the car tonight? I'm going. No, you had the car twice this week. Dad becomes the obstacle. And, how do you feel about it? Do you totally disrespect Dad? Or do you think Dad is cool and you'll listen to him? Or, what do you feel about him? So these are kind of questions you can always be asking the actor, what their goal is and what the obstacle is. And how would you solve this? How would you get Dad to give you the keys? Make him laugh. Can you make your goal? Let's see if we can get Dad tickled and make him laugh. How about that?
Now, do you give that direction to one actor and not let the other actor know that it's coming?
Oh yeah, you absolutely. You want to kind of keep them fresh like that. Sometimes you can give them opposing things. Elia Kazan was famous for giving actors opposing goals. And in one scene in a play called Dark at the Top of the Stairs, girlfriend of the boy who lives in the house comes in and she's got a coat on, and the mother of the boyfriend comes over and takes her coat and hangs it up for her. So Kazan goes to the mother and says, now take the coat off and hang it up. Then he goes to the girlfriend and says, do not let her have the coat.
and action.
And action. And what happens? They don't know what's going on with each other, but one is thinking, this little bitch is trying to screw with me. God damn it. And suddenly he gets a little bit of a hate relationship going. I mean, it's really tricky stuff to try that. It'll backfire on you like crazy. Right. It used to backfire on Kazan all the time. But, when it worked, it was fabulous. You'd get these weird moments between actors.
Right. And they're just like, what's going on? Yeah, that's actually really great. I mean, at the end of the day, you want just an authentic performance, if you will, that is not acting. It's reacting in many ways.
Right. Yeah. I mean, reacting, Gary Cooper used to say, I'm not a very good actor, but I'm a great listener. And so when you're listening in a scene, you're not just standing there waiting for your cue line and thinking, okay, now what do I say? Okay, what do I do? No, you got to be listening, actively listening, and finding a way that you're giving something back to the other actor, responding to them.
Now, how do you deal with an overconfident actor? Someone who thinks that they know everything and they don't want to listen to you. And how do you deal with an overconfident actor?
I guess it depends on what they're doing. The overconfidence might be a cover up for lack of confidence. That they're coming in, but you got to give them room to hang themselves, and let them try. My experience with Frank Langella in the Dracula film I did with him years ago was when we got to doing on film, one scene that was almost a duplicate of what he had done on Broadway in the play of Dracula. He was acting suddenly at a scale that was bigger than Mount Rushmore, and
Right.
and it was not going to work on film, and I, you know, I was trying to bring him down, and get to a more manageable film scale, but he was just totally convinced that that's the way it had to go. So eventually I wound up saying to him, tell you what, when this film comes back from the London labs, we were in the south of England, in Cornwall. When it comes back, come to Daly's and look at it with me. And if you like it, I'll shut up. I'll never say anything again. But if you don't like it, we have a chance we can redo this at some point. And so he shows up in Daly's, and the scene comes up, and he watches for a couple of minutes, and then I hear, "Oh my dear God." and
there you go.
And he sees that the kind of directing that was great on Broadway was over the top on film. And so several weeks later, when we were on a sound stage, we had rebuilt the set, and we did it again. It's one of the best scenes in the movie. It's a big face-off with Laurence Olivier, and the two of them are out acting each other all over the place, but in a way that works so powerfully on film. I mean, there's Olivier in his 70s, ill with cancer, almost, barely propped up, and he's, out acting Langella like crazy. And, Frank is realizing he's got to really step up to the mark here, because he's against, a total master of film acting.
How was it working with Laurence Olivier? I mean, that's not a sentence I generally ask people.
What a cool experience. That man knew more about acting and directing than I will ever know, and understood my problems. So even when we had a couple of little disagreements here and there, he would say, well, I'm only doing this because I don't want to embarrass you in front of the crew, but I don't believe this is the right way to do it. And so I could get the hint, and I'd say, well, go ahead and do it the way you want to do it, what you think is right. Because, I said to him, the first person I ever saw in the movies was when I was 5 years old, and my mother took me to see Henry V, directed by you-know-who and starring you-know-who.
Right.
So it's really tough for me, to work with you and call you Larry, when I really want to say, yes, sir, Lord Olivier.
Yeah, how young were you? You were in your 20s, or because I was early in your career.
I was like late 30s.
Well, really? So you had already been directing a bunch, but still, it's still Laurence Olivier. I mean, you could have been 50 and still Laurence Olivier.
Oh, exactly. What a trip! What a trip! And such an amazing professional, and never a diva. Always totally there for what we needed to do. And physically, he was always the bravest physical actor on the English stage, and even in his 70s, a bit frail. If there was a chase or running or things, he wanted to do it.
That's awesome.
He could do it. No, don't send my double in here. I can do it.
He was the Tom Cruise of his day.
Yes. Oh boy.
Now, I wanted to throw a scenario at you. I was actually talking to a director the other day who called me about a problem they were having on set, and they're like, "Look, I'm directing a few $1 million movie, and my lead just got off of a big studio project, and he's a young actor, like probably in his early 20s." But he was like the third banana or the fourth banana in a big studio, big monster film, with a very big movie star who will remain nameless. In that big studio movie, that movie star, he started to idolize how that movie star did everything. So he would like whatever that movie star did, he started taking notes and he started acting like that movie star on this $1 or $2 million film, saying that I'm never going to allow myself to be shot sitting down because this movie star doesn't allow that to happen. And this movie star doesn't do this, so I'm not going to do that. So he started doing all these things, but yet he's never done anything. He's not a movie star. Nobody knows who he is. But since he played the second or third banana in this, his ego was out of control. How do you deal with that? If this is your lead and the reason for the financing of the film, how do you handle that situation, in your opinion?
Wow, that is a tough one.
Mm-hmm. And then, by the way, the actor did really love the director, so there was a good relationship there. But yet he stood firm on certain things that he wouldn't do because this other movie star wouldn't do them. So there's that, a little bit more information.
Wow, boy, that's a stumper. How to best to deal with that, because you've got somebody coming in who believes he's right so desperately because he watched somebody use those techniques and admired how they worked, and yet not taking into consideration that one person could get away with it because he was, a
movie star,
the Laurence Olivier of his time.
Right.
And could be difficult. Not that Olivier ever was, but now you've got this punk. That's the only way to classify it.
Pretty much.
Punk coming in like that, and I don't know. I think you have to have some conversations in the motorhome about how we're gonna deal with this, so that you don't have these conversations in public. That's at least one of the first things I would do, because when you have them in public, people feel honor bound to maintain that position, and to the death. And they have an audience. So when these things come up in front of the crew, the first thing you got to do is get them out of there and get them in a place where you can have the conversation and talk to them about tell me why you think that you wouldn't get shot sitting down. How does that work? Talk to me about that, and see if you can think out of good argument, but definitely you have to hear them out. That's for sure. You have to hear them out. It has to be in private, where you can listen to them and listen to their opinions, and then they may be willing to listen to the problems that you have in allowing them to do this. Why shooting them sitting down is
right.
Is not a good idea, and why you have to be standing up. I take it that's what he wanted to do.
The other way, he always wanted to be standing up. He never wanted to be shot in a position of not powerful or not heroic.
Right. Yeah. I got it. Yeah. Always doing that. Oh my God.
Okay. I mean, after the show is over, I'll tell you who the star he was emulating is. But that's a difficult scenario. And by the way, this director, it was the second film that he had been doing. So he's still just getting off the ground himself. So he really didn't have a lot of, experience to kind of fall back on, or a filmography or anything that he could fall back on to just go, look, man, I've done this for a while. This is just the way it's going to be.
Well, yeah. And if you're, one of our great directors, the intimidation factor precedes them.
Right.
And they don't have to do anything. But somebody more beginning, and I can remember back to those days with me, where you're constantly having to prove yourself, and an arrogant or a very strong-minded actor is going to try to walk all over you, and that's really tough to deal with. But listening to them, and getting them to be able to articulate their points of view, and so on, is a start on how you're gonna do that.
But do you feel that a lot of this is just fear and insecurity? I mean, when you have an actor who's doing that, it's just coming from fear and insecurity. And if you can address that, you might be able to break through.
Right. Yeah, of course it is. It's a very defensive thing. It's, here's a way I can get through my life. I've seen a guy who can do it a certain way and is really cool when he does it this way, so I'm going to emulate that. And now I have to defend that position at the same time, and I get very defensive about it. So the first bad thing I could do is come in and say, no. You don't want to do that. I had you may have heard me tell this story with worked with Goldie Hawn on a movie called Bird on the Wire.
Sure, Mel Gibson and Goldie, yeah.
And there's a scene where she and Mel Gibson, when they were boyfriend and girlfriend years ago, were riding on a roller coaster, and she thinks back to that. She tells me on the day that we're lining up the roller coaster shot that she hates roller coasters. She's only been working with us on the picture for 4 months, but now she picks the day to tell me she doesn't like roller coasters, and she doesn't want to do it. Right. And we shoot something else that day, and I'm going, well, this is half our day's work today, and so. I was saying, well, tell me more about this. Why are you afraid? And how does this bother you? And I let her talk about it. And I said, one thing I think that the roller coaster does for us is it helps show the relationship between these when they were boyfriend and girlfriend and in a relationship, and how much fun they were having. So, what would you think about this, Goldie? What would you think if we took the roller coaster when it rolls into the station and stops? You know where that is, right? Yes, I know. Well, what if we could back that roller coaster up about 50 or 100 feet and have you be in it, and it just rolls into the station, and you just, act your ass off being delighted and gleeful, and we can use that. And otherwise, I can use your photo double, Dawn, and she can hide her face, and we'll get by with it. She said, well, I can do that. I can do it. Just do 100 feet, roll in. Absolutely. That's all we have to do. And she gets into there, and we get the cameras lined up, and she's sitting in kind of Mel Gibson's lap in the front car of the roller coaster. Start the cameras. It comes rolling in. Boom, it's all done. And I'm running over while the guys are checking the cameras to make sure they rolled. And I hear Mel talking to her, and he's saying, well, that was nothing. She said, that's all there is? I mean, that was the thing? He said, yeah, it's no big deal. And I suddenly went, oh, my God. Okay, quick. I motioned to the camera guys, get away from the camera. I roll the camera. And I waved to the guy who ran the roller coaster, start the roller coaster, go. And it just took off with them in it.
I'm assuming you had a camera in there covering it?
Oh, yeah, we had 2 cameras on it covering it. And it goes up and around. I'm going, I am in such trouble if she
it didn't have a good time
like this. I am so screwed. I can't believe it. But I had to just go for it. And it comes rolling back around about 2 minutes later, and her eyes are as big as saucers, and she's laughing and cackling and carrying on. And oh, that was great. I love that. And I'm going, oh, thank God. And thank God the camera rolled, and I'm not fired.
That could have turned That could have turned ugly very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just have to pull tricks out, and take your opportunity and kind of trick people into it and hope to hell that it doesn't, blow back on you.
Yeah, there's that one scene that just reminded me of like telling an actor one thing and doing another, which is generally not something you want to do. But in the end scene of Die Hard, when Hans Gruber is being dropped from the building, that close up, that like kind of iconic close up shot, the look on his face of fear is because the stunt guy is like, "Oh, we're gonna go on 3," and he goes 1, and he let go, and he wasn't expecting it, and that fear on his face was actual fear.
Oh my gosh.
But it was a great. That's why it looks so great. But you generally don't want to do that.
Fabulous.
Now,
looking, yeah.
Now, how do you balance knowing what you want but still being open to ideas? Because I find that a lot of directors, when I work with them, they come in guns a blaring. I know everything. Blah 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 blah. So you have to have a sense of confidence of that you are in control, but yet you still have to be open to ideas and collaboration because that's what the filmmaking process is. So what's your take on that?
My feeling is that you have to be prepared. Mm-hmm. You have to be as prepared as you possibly can with answering every question and assuming that you have no help but yourself, that people just barely can do it. Now, as you approach the set, you have to say, wait a second, this DP, I hired the best DP I could find, and he hired the best grip and gaffer, and we've got these great makeup people. Let's see what they bring us. Let's be open to that and see how it works with what I'm doing, so that we wind up with a blend. If nobody's got any ideas, I know exactly how to do it that I think will work, but I really want to hear what the other people are doing. So I will turn to camera operators, for example, as I'm staging a scene. Usually the default position of a camera operator when the director's staging a scene is over sitting checking their iPod, their iPhone for emails, right, and seeing if they've got a date that night with their girlfriend. But I say, no, you guys have to stand over here and watch me stage these scenes, and I'm going to ask you when we finished how we're going to shoot it, and you're going to tell me. So be ready with an answer. So I make them watch, and I make them contribute. Well, I think we could go over here and we could do this, and I think we could do this. And so what we wind up with is maybe a blending of ideas, or trying a couple of different approaches to things. But I really make people come in and collaborate with me. And they're used to working a lot in situations where they just sit back and wait to be told what to do, mm-hmm. which is the worst use of creative people. These people, I'm a camera operator, but that means I got here because I've got a very creative sense of, how to work with this piece of machinery. And, I don't want to be stuck into just a robotic operator of a piece of hardware. I want to be able to, contribute an idea. So if they know that I'm open to it, they're going to be more open to. So I get great suggestions that way.
Now, I have to ask you, in your entire career, is there a scene, is there a moment that you consider like, this was just magic, this was amazing, this is my favorite favorite scene that I directed? What is that thing in your filmography that you still can remember to this day?
You're going to think this one is crazy.
Go for it.
We talked about Short Circuit a little while ago, and I'm thinking, I've got a scene in there where Ali Sheedy is dancing with number 5, the robot.
I remember it.
And they're going to How Deep Is Your Love, and here she is with this huge unwieldy robot, and they're turning each other around. The robot is dipping her. I mean, we're doing crazy stuff here, and the playback is going with the Bee Gees singing "How Deep Is Your Love." I mean, it was so magical because it was so silly,
Right.
and yet it was the kind of thing you can do in movies that, just as a sense of magic that this big screwed together TV prop or movie prop of number 5,
Right.
could actually be doing this wonderful romantic dip and dance. So I remember standing there as we're going through the takes, just completely almost crying.
You're like, this is just a piece of machinery.
It's just so nuts.
And that's the one that sticks out of all the film, out of all the stuff you've done. That's the one that's like, you know what? That dancing scene with Johnny Five. That's awesome.
I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of others, but the first one that pops up in your head is that you go, wow, well, that means something, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, a movie like Short Circuit would never be made in today's studio system. Most of the films in the past that you've directed would not be made in the studio system, and that's generally for any film made in the 80s. Almost wouldn't be made
Right.
in the studio system. I mean, do you, as a creator who's been around for so long, do you find that it's kind of sad that there's no as much risk taking in films? I think there is more in television, but in films like Short Circuit, Stakeout, those kind of films, War Games, these kind of films that would just not be made in today's world. And now they're going back to reboot it, like Gremlins and The Goonies and all of these, like, that would never get made in today's world. And I think we're a lesser society for it. I think we should be doing stuff like that in the studio system. What's your feeling on it, seeing how it's changed so much?
Well, I have to look forward to what we can be doing going forward, and not worrying about what we can't do anymore.
Okay.
And I am seeing, this opening up of streaming and television and video and so on, where so many things are getting made that have their own magic and their own special thing to them.
You're right.
That would not be made in the theatrical system, because it's hard to get people off their butts and out to the theater. The people that like to go, the young people, because they want to get out of the house. They don't want to be stuck in the place. And older audiences tend to, not be so flexible about that. So we're paying attention to that. We're seeing, so many places, not just the 3 networks, but now suddenly all these different channels. Now we've got Netflix, and we've got Hulu, and we've got this, and Apple Plus, and Disney Plus, and Google Plus, and everything is plus. So there's so many possible places that you can take material now that it's possible to make, that I don't think television would have made years ago, but now they're much more open to much more edgy stuff. Watching the 2 versions of Catherine the Great that have been on recently, one that's a complete romp and one that's very serious. I mean, I can't imagine those being made as a movie nowadays, though back in the 70s and so on, yes, they would have made the serious version, I suppose.
Right, exactly. Now, what are you up to next? What are you working on now?
Well, we're just getting a book ready to come out. About 4 or 5 years ago, we published John Badham on Directing. Now we're doing the 2nd edition, which is so much more about surviving television, how directors can survive the landmines and the political minefields right. that is television. It's such a different setup from directing feature films, where you may be toward the top of the food chain, you as the director. But now in the world of streaming, you're way down the food chain. it's really tough for a director who finds themselves constantly about to be run over by so many people who are in charge here and there. And how do you survive this? Because if you don't survive, you're going to lose the way you make your living. Not just not be able to do creative work, but that's how you make your living. And you have to re-gear your brain to see how you can survive and navigate through these really troubled, difficult waters of working in streaming media.
And that is where the majority, I mean, there's a lot more opportunity in streaming and television than there is in feature work nowadays.
Oh, God. That's what's wonderful about it. I mean, instead of there just being 15 or 20 dramatic shows a week, now there are hundreds of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell my students at Chapman that I know we all want to make feature films, but I bet that most of us are going to start making our living, in a smaller medium. We may be doing quibbies or music videos or things for YouTube, things like that. There's great respectability in doing all of that, and it's creative work. So you don't want to turn up your nose, because that's how you're gonna survive and make a living as a director. If you're going to be snobby about it, you may never work.
Very true. Very, very true.
So,
now, what advice would you give? What advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
Thank God we have the kind of equipment that we have, where people are shooting films on their iPhones. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's amazing the quality that you can get on iPhones, even of a couple of generations ago. And I'm seeing what my students are shooting when they're going out. No longer are they going over to the gold room and getting, a Sony prosumer camera. They're doing it on the iPhones, and it's coming out really nicely. And if they get a little bit of good equipment, like decent microphones, then the quality just shoots up tremendously. Usually the part where sound is involved gets the least respect. The visual always gets the strong respect. Anyway, the point being, you can make films that you can show to people. People that want to, are entitled to say to you, "Let me see something you've done. Let me look at, what's a short film or a short reel that you have," and that you can do, not having to be in film school. You can do it on your own, and it's a much more entrepreneurial type of business than it used to be, where when you were shooting 16 millimeter film and stuff like that, it was so bloody expensive that only a few people could even afford to buy the film stock. But nowadays, almost anybody can make a pretty decent looking film and give you a sense of, this person knows how to tell a story. That's what we want to see. Can we tell a story? Not can we shoot a cool angle?
Right.
Not have we got a wacky lens here, but can they tell a story? Can they show us a character? That ultimately is always going to be the most important thing. I mean, the thing that got Spielberg started is the famous Amblin, the film that he made for next to no money. You looked at it and you knew it had been made for 25 cents, but he told a story with characters that you loved, and it broke your heart by the end. And that was all it took to get him going, versus so many of the films that were being made by students at the time that you couldn't make heads or tails of.
Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film industry or in life?
Never be sarcastic. I love to be sarcastic. It's so much fun. You get this silly idea and you just say it. And then suddenly there's blowback and you're in such trouble. Because people take it wrong, They didn't want to hear that.
and it's one of my biggest faults. I've gotten in trouble more times from that. So I keep lecturing myself, don't be sarcastic. Don't do that.
That's amazing. Now, what was the biggest fear you had to overcome to make your first film?
Well, I had been making episodic television and television movies for 4 or 5 years at that point. But there was always this feeling of like, now I'm stepping into the bigger leagues. Is it going to look like I'm just still shooting a little hour television show? Is it going to not have the scope, the size of the storytelling? That was the big worry that I had. And, you know, it's always a worry to, you know, are you going to tell the story well or not? And I think that every day, even as I go to the set now, and I'm driving to the set in the morning, I'm scared to death that how it's going to go today. You know, is this scene going to work? Do I even know what I'm doing? You know, I'm constantly worried. And I tell myself, you know, if I weren't worried, maybe I shouldn't even be going to work.
Good advice. And 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Wow. I don't know what the third one would be, but I know that No Country for Old Men is a constant favorite of mine. Citizen Kane, I can always watch. Mm-hmm. I can watch The Godfather till the cows come home. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't know what it is about it, but, you know, if it is on television and I happen to flick past it, I say, oh, well, I like this scene. Let me watch a minute or so of it. Right. 2 hours later.
You're in part 2.
I'm hanging it up and I say, Francis, thank you. God bless you for making this film.
And where can people find you and buy the book?
And they'll be able to buy it on Amazon easily, or Michael Weesey Productions, which also sells the book. But Amazon is the quick place to go. And
where's your other book that you have that which is fantastic as well?
The other book is called "I'll Be in My Trailer," and it again talks about dealing with actors and how I managed to almost completely screw up the last couple of weeks of Saturday Night Fever by getting into a stupid argument with John Travolta that I didn't have to get into. And he turns and looks at me and says, "I'll be in my trailer," and heads off to his trailer. Well, we're standing on the Verrazano Bridge at 2 a.m, and he's refusing to come out to shoot, all because of, you know, something stupid that I did. And a lot of the book is, you know, about what could I have done better so I never had to have this problem in the first place. Excellent. Not his fault.
Right. Well, John, I recommend everyone pick up both of your books. I loved the first version of On Directing, and I'm looking forward to reading the second one as well. It is always a pleasure having you on the show, sir. I'm, as you know, a very, very big fan of your work and the continued work that you're doing with education at Chapman and through your book. So thank you again so much for being on the show.